This video is part of my Nikon D5200 user guide. In this video we're going to look at the information screen on the back of the Nikon D5200 and kind of digest what is being shown there. The camera is asleep. I'm going to wake it up by half pressing the shutter. Right now I'm in auto mode on the dial. It's the green camera. You can see that in the top left corner. We have this nice little dial that represents our shutter speed, our aperture, and our ISO. The camera has picked all of these values based on the exposure it thinks is correct. We also are shooting in single shooter mode. The camera will beep when it gets focus. The battery is full. That stuff is all pretty straightforward. Down here in this corner of the screen we have our little focus indicator, and when you're on auto it just automatically gets focus. Oh, I put it into manual focus. It automatically chooses the point it needs. These are the 39 autofocus points right there. Up here, just to the right of the viewfinder, is the little I button, which will activate this kind of mini menu in this visual screen. And I can now navigate through the options available to me by pressing left and right and up and down on the little control pad. Because I'm in auto mode, very few options are available to me. I can press OK with fine selected and choose the image quality that I want to shoot. RAW plus a JPEG fine, JPEG normal with RAW, basic JPEG with RAW, just a RAW file, a fine JPEG, a normal JPEG, and a basic. The difference between fine, normal, and basic is the amount of compression. My personal preference is to shoot RAW. I have other videos that talk about that, so I'm not going to spend time in this video talking about that. Let's leave it for now though on JPEG fine, because that does give us some other options that aren't available to us when we shoot RAW, and I want to be able to talk about all of the options. Now just to the right of that I have an image size choice. So the difference between JPEG, fine, normal, and basic is the amount of compression. Now we're choosing the actual resolution. How large do we want the files to be? We have our choices of large, 15 megabytes, medium, approximately, and these sizes are approximately, each image is going to be about 9 megabytes, or small, each image is going to be about 4 megabytes. These range in size from resolution of 6,000 by 4,000 down to, this is in the neighborhood of 2,000 and some odd by, I think, 3,000 and some odd. Below the image size, it is telling us the number of images that we can take on this card in that file size. So quite a lot. The I button, the information button, will get us back. The only other choice that we have on this is to choose whether or not flash mode should be auto, red eye reduction, which is where it uses its little lamp to light up and shrink a pupil, because the reflection from the pupil is what gives you your red eye, or turn the flash completely off. In auto mode I would leave it on auto, and if you need the flash to completely be off, use the flash off on the dial. So we'll just leave that there. Those are all of our options. Let's press I now to get back out of that, and it's ready to take a picture. Let's switch now to P, which is program auto, and we now have quite a greater number of options. And you can see now as I navigate through, all of these will light up and be selectable. So same options for the quality, image size, but now we can choose whether or not we want bracketing. Bracketing is great if you want to do HDR images and process them yourself in the camera. What bracketing does is allows you to take 3 images or more at different exposure values. So you can take one that exposes nicely for the shadows, take one that exposes nicely for the midtones, and take one that exposes nicely for the highlights. Then you bring those back to your computer, you sandwich them all together in a program like Photoshop or Photomatix, and you get a very large dynamic range image that covers and has detail in the shadows and in the highlights all throughout. Here you can choose how great the difference between each image should be. 1 exposure value, 1.3, 1.7, that's all listed there. HDR. The camera will do an HDR image for you in the camera. In this case, the Nikon takes 2 images, sandwiches those together and you get one resulting image. It does not keep the other images for you. And then you have your choice of high, auto, extra high, high, normal, low. Play around with these before you use them in important settings. The high with the asterisk, I don't recommend you using unless you really want that very painterly look. You get halos around your contrast areas and things of that sort, so it's quite noticeable, and it can be a neat effect. Active delighting. Some of these things I mentioned in my menu review or user guide. Active delighting is dangerous to use if you're shooting RAW, because the feedback given to you on the back of the screen can look one thing, and when you bring those RAW files into something like Lightroom, they can be very different. I keep this off all of the time, but if you're shooting solely JPEG, you might find this useful. Again, it's similar to the HDR idea, except it's not sandwiching multiple images in one image. It tries to do a little bit of exposure tweaking to save your shadows from being too dark and your highlights from being too bright. It sounds like a good thing, but shooting RAW, you can get better results out of it if you're willing to do a little post-processing. White balance, this is where you can set your white balance. And again, auto is fine most of the time, unless you're noticing that you're getting poor color out of your camera in certain situations. Again, shooting RAW, you can easily correct in white balance. Oops, that's not where I wanted to go. Afterwards. We have your ISO here, and in your ISO you have your options from 100 all the way up to H2. Very, very high, very noisy images, but if it's a must get shot and it's low light, you have those available to you. We have our picture controls. If you're shooting RAW, these are ignored, but this is where you can set your more vivid image with sharper image detail, or a more neutral or a portrait orientation, and you can have your custom picture controls here as well. Now we have your metering mode. Do you want the camera? This is where the camera decides. So the camera's already deciding the exposure. This is how much of the scene that it's going to look at to decide. Matrix metering is very much kind of taking in the whole scene to decide what your exposure should be. Center weighted is pretty straightforward. A good thing to note, anytime you're on any of this menu system and you have a question, the zoom out button is also a help button. And you press that and it will tell you exactly what you are looking at and what it will do. Center weighted center weighted metering. Greatest weight assigned to the center of the frame. Choose when the subject fills the center of the frame. Pretty straightforward. And then spot metering is really when you want a specific spot to be exposed correctly. You meter to that spot and the camera sets your exposure for that spot. Flash mode. We have a few more options now. We have slow sync. This will leave the shutter speed a little bit slower. Usually when you shoot with a when you shoot with a flash, the shutter speed is automatically something fairly quick. Here we'll get a little bit slower, plus the red eye reduction. And again, we can hit the question mark. And now you can see that there's lots of options here, and you can scroll down through all of them. So it's a little help guide built in. Again, slow without. And slow is rear curtain sync, which you can use for some neat effects, and there's a sample image right there. Then we have our flash compensation. Generally, the flash decides how much output it should flash when it fires, but you can tell it to flash a little bit more or a little bit less depending on the situation, and you have those options in there, up or down. And exposure compensation. Again, the camera decides the correct exposure, but when you're shooting in P, S, or A, you can adjust that exposure to be a little bit higher or a little bit lower than what the camera thinks is a correct exposure. And those are all of our options when we are shooting P. Let me switch to autofocus, because there is one more option, or actually two more options there that we didn't look at because manual focus was on. Now, our focus mode has come to life. We can have it do auto servo AF. That's really when you're photographing things in motion and you want the camera to track those. You can have single servo AF. It's really just for firing a single shot, meters the still scene, focuses on the still scene, takes the picture. continuous Servo AF. It is constantly trying to focus. You can have that turned on for video if you're trying to capture and keep things in focus during video as well. It can be distracting and professionals don't use it, but again, if you're trying to capture your kid running across the backyard, it is an option to use to. And then manual focus is the same as flipping the switch on the side of the lenses. And then we have the AF area. This is what do you want to use. When I said when it was in auto, it decides which points it should use. You can narrow that down to a single, when you're shooting in P, S, A, or M, you can narrow that down to a single point. 9 points, it decides which of the 9 to use. 21 points, the full 39. The 3D tracking in conjunction with the other is supposed to do very well for objects in motion and moving. And then finally, auto area AF, it kind of chunks up the frame into several areas, chooses which area it should be focusing on. Most of the time, my personal preference is for single point AF, with you deciding which point is being used. Again, the more decisions you can take away from the camera when you know what you're doing, the better photographs you're going to get out of your camera. I'll have videos coming that talk in more detail about these area points. If we turn our live view on now, we can see that we have that little square, and I can move that square using the directional pad anywhere I want on the screen to focus. Let's put it right here. It's pretty much already pre-focused on this little basket of moss, and I hold down the button and it focuses. I can of course zoom in here nice and close and adjust manual focus just by rotating the ring on the lens, and pressing OK will zoom back out to 100%. And since I'm in program mode, it is deciding the shutter speed, the aperture, and the ISO for a good picture here. And I can take that picture, and there it is. So this was just a look at the information displayed on the back of the camera. Well, let's get back out of live view. There it is. If you have any questions about this video, anything we covered here, including the Nikon D5200, the menu system, live view, just leave a comment down below or come over and find me on the Facebook page where we're building up a wonderful community of photographers. I appreciate you watching, and if you haven't yet, please take a moment and subscribe. It's a nice way to say thanks to me and to make sure that you don't miss future videos.